A building does not start with the sky. It starts in the dirt. It starts where no one is looking. The most powerful work of a human being is the work they do when they are alone and silent. There is a story, not a famous story, not one that is taught in schools or spoken about at dinner tables, but it is one of the most important stories a person can ever hear. In a great city, in the middle of the night, when the streets are empty and the lights in the windows are all turned off, there is a man working. He is deep in the ground. He is covered in mud. He is surrounded by darkness, by water, by noise from the machines that dig and break the earth apart. No one sees him. No one is watching. No one is cheering for him. There is no crowd, no applause, no camera, no newspaper writing about his work. He is just a man. In the mud, in the dark, doing the thing that most people will never see. He is the architect, and he is building the foundation. Years later, when the skyscraper rises above that city, when people from all over the world come to look at it, when visitors point their cameras at the top of the building and say, "Look at how tall it is. Look at how beautiful it is." They do not think about the man in the mud. They do not think about the dark nights. They do not think about the foundation buried beneath the earth that no one will ever see, that no one will ever photograph, that no one will ever talk about at a party. But here is the truth. The building stands because of that man. The building is tall because the foundation is deep. The building reaches the sky because someone was willing to go into the dirt. The beauty that everyone sees on the surface is only possible because of the work that no one ever saw underneath. This is the story of every great human life. The people the world celebrates are not the ones who perform the most in public. They are the ones who prepared the most in private. They are the ones who did the hard work when no one was watching. They are the ones who were willing to go into the dirt, into the darkness, into the silence, and do what needed to be done without an audience. And the first thing that must be understood before anything else is said, before any lesson is taught, is this. Most people are building on top of nothing. Most people are putting up walls with no foundation. Most people are spending all of their time on the outside of the building, painting the walls, decorating the windows, making things look beautiful for the people walking by, while the ground underneath is soft, while the ground underneath is weak, while the ground underneath has never been touched, never been dug, never been prepared for the weight of the life they are trying to build. This is why so many lives collapse. This is why so many people who seem to have everything suddenly lose everything. This is why so many people who look strong from the outside fell apart on the inside, because they built on top of nothing, because they never did the silent work, because they never went into the mud when no one was watching. What is the silent work? What does it mean to build in the dark? It means the work you do on your character when no one is grading you. It means the discipline you practice when no one is holding you accountable. It means the boundaries you set and protect when no one is applauding you for setting them. It means the habits you choose, the thoughts you refuse, the people you walk away from, and the standards you hold yourself to when there is no reward coming, no trophy, no recognition, no follower count going up, no one saying, "Well done." The foundation of a great life is built in silence. Silence is not the absence of activity. Silence is the presence of depth. A quiet person is not always a weak person. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one doing the most work on the inside. Sometimes the person who talks the least is the one who has built the most underneath. The world has taught people to confuse noise with power. The world has taught people to believe that if they are not being talked about, they are not doing anything important. The world has taught people that visibility is the same thing as value. But these things are not the same. Visibility is what people see. Value is what is actually there. A tree that is healthy can survive a storm. A tree that only looks healthy on the outside but has no roots will fall. And the storm does not care how beautiful the tree looked. The storm does not care how many people admired the tree. The storm tests the root. And if the root is not there, the tree is gone. Character is the root. Character is what a person does when there is no one watching. Character is what a person chooses when the choice is difficult and there is no reward for choosing correctly. Character is what happens in the private places. in the quiet moments, in the spaces between the public performances. A person with character does not need a crowd to be disciplined. A person with character does not need applause to do the right thing. A person with character has made a decision deep in the foundation of who they are about who they will be. And that decision holds them steady when everything around them is shaking. This is what is being built in these words. A foundation, a deep understanding of what it means to become on the inside the person that the life you want requires you to be. Because here is what many people do not understand. The life you want has requirements. The life you want is not available to just anyone. The life you want is only available to the person who has been built for it. And being built for it is a process. A quiet process, a slow process, a process that happens far beneath the surface, where no one is watching, where no one is applauding, where the only thing keeping you going is the understanding of why the work matters. And part of that building process, one of the most important parts, one of the parts that almost no one talks about, honestly, is the process of elimination, the process of removing, the process of cutting away, not adding, removing. The greatest sculptors in history did not create beautiful statues by adding material. They created beautiful statues by removing material, by cutting away everything that was not the statue, by having the wisdom to see what needed to go, by having the courage to remove it, even when removing it was painful, even when removing it meant destroying something that was familiar, something that had been there for a long time, something that other people might not have understood needed to go. This is the conversation today. 5 things that must be eliminated from a life if that life is going to become what it was made to become. 5 things that must be cut away quietly, without announcements, without explanations to the crowd, without asking permission or waiting for someone to agree. Just removed in silence, like the architect working in the dark, doing the work no one sees so that the building can stand. The first thing that must be eliminated is the need for human permission. Say that again. The need for human permission. This is one of the greatest traps ever built for the human mind. It is a trap so well designed, so comfortable, so deeply buried in the way people are raised and taught and rewarded from childhood that most people never even realize they are inside it. They walk around their entire lives looking for nods of approval, for signs that someone important has said yes, for confirmation from other people that they are allowed to want what they want, to do what they feel called to do, to become who they were designed to become. And the trap is not obvious. The trap does not look like a trap. It looks like respect. It looks like humility. It looks like being a good person who values the opinions of others. It feels from the inside like a virtue, like the mature and responsible thing to do, to check with people, to ask what they think, to want approval before moving forward. But it is not a virtue. It is a cage. And the key to the cage is hanging outside in the hands of other people, and they will never give it over. Here is the truth about human permission. The people being asked for permission are not equipped to give it. Not because they are bad people, not because they do not care, but because they do not have the information. They do not know the full picture. They do not know what is inside the person asking. They do not know the vision, the calling, the depth of the desire, the size of the capacity. They only know what they can see, and what they can see is always limited. Think about what it means to ask someone for permission to pursue a dream. What is actually being said in that moment? Please tell me if what is burning inside of me is real. Please confirm for me that what I feel is valid. Please decide for me whether the thing I want is worth wanting. That is what is being asked. And the person being asked, with all the love and good intentions in the world, is looking at their own limited experience, their own fears, their own failures, their own understanding of what is possible, and they are making a judgment about someone else's life from inside their own limited world. And that judgment, given with love, wrapped in concern, delivered with the best intentions, will often be wrong. Not because the person giving it is wrong, but because the person giving it is not the person who was built for the dream. They were not made for it. They do not carry it inside them. They cannot feel what the person asking feels. And so their judgment, however well-meaning, is incomplete. And the person who waits for that approval, who holds their life in pause while they wait for someone to say yes, is handing the wheel of their destiny to someone who does not know the road. This is not a small problem. This is not a minor inefficiency. This is a life-altering trap. And the damage it causes is enormous. People have sat in the wrong careers for decades because someone they respected said that is not a realistic path. People have stayed in places that were not right for them because the people around them said, why would you leave? Things are fine here. People have buried gifts, silenced callings, abandoned purposes, and swallowed potential because they could not get the approval of the people around them. And those people, the ones who gave the opinion that killed the dream, they moved on. They went to their dinners and their weekend trips and their conversations about other things. They did not carry the weight of the advice they gave. They did not lose the years. They did not feel the hollowness. The person who asked for permission carried all of that. The person who gave up their life while waiting for a yes that never came is the one who paid the price. This has to stop. There is a difference between seeking wisdom and seeking permission. This is very important. These are not the same thing. A wise person finds mentors. A wise person asks questions. A wise person listens to people who have walked further down the road and can share what they learned. That is wisdom. That is healthy and necessary. But there is a point where the conversation moves from learning to waiting, where the question stops being, what can you teach me? And starts being, do you agree that I should do this? That is the moment permission seeking takes over. And that is the moment that must be caught and corrected. Wisdom says, tell me what you know so that I can add it to what I know and make a better decision. Permission seeking says, tell me it is okay because I cannot move until you give me your blessing. Those are two completely different postures. One position is standing. The other position is kneeling. A person who needs human permission to live their purpose is kneeling before people who were never given the authority to rule over them. No human being was placed on this earth to be the gatekeeper of another human being's destiny. No parent, no spouse, no friend, no boss, no mentor, no social media follower has been given that authority. And when a person hands that authority over, they are giving away something they were never supposed to give. Now, someone might say, but what about relationships? What about the people who love me and want good things for me? Should their opinion matter at all? Of course it matters. Relationships matter. Love matters. People who care about a person's well-being are valuable. But mattering and controlling are different things. A person can listen to the people who love them, can consider what they say, can take the parts that are useful and still make their own decision, still move forward, still trust what is burning inside them, even when the people around them cannot see it yet. Because here is something important. Most of the great things that have ever been done in human history were not understood at the time they were being done. Most of the people who changed the world were told at some point by someone they loved or respected that what they were doing did not make sense, that it was too risky, that it was not realistic, that they should be careful, that they should think about it more, that they should wait a little longer. And the ones who changed the world kept going anyway, not because they did not love the people who said those things, but because they understood that the calling inside them was louder than the opinions around them, that the pull of purpose was stronger than the pull of approval. Eliminating the need for human permission does not mean becoming arrogant. It does not mean refusing to learn from others. It does not mean treating relationships as unimportant. It means something very specific and very powerful. It means making a decision in the quiet of a person's own heart that their life belongs to them and to the purpose they were made for, not to the comfort of the people watching, not to the opinions of people who see the outside but cannot see the inside, not to the approval of a world that does not fully understand what is being carried. And this decision, this elimination of the need for permission is done in silence. It is not announced. It is not posted. It is not made into a declaration that friends and family are informed about. It is just a quiet shift in the foundation. A deep interior change that says, from this point forward, the direction of this life will be set by purpose, not by permission. No one will notice it happening at first. That is fine. The architect in the mud was not noticed either. But the work being done in that quiet space will eventually hold everything up. The need for permission must also be eliminated from the day-to-day choices, not just the big life decisions. It shows up in small ways too, in the way a person dresses, because they are waiting for someone to say it is acceptable. In the way a person speaks, because they are always measuring how the words will land with others. In the way a person spends their time, because they feel they need to justify every choice to someone. In the way a person eats, sleeps, rests, and plays, because they have internalized a voice that is not their own, a voice that is always evaluating them. That voice, the voice of other people's approval, is one of the most exhausting things a person can carry. It never rests. It is always evaluating. It is always asking, will they be happy with this? Will they approve? Will they think well of me? And because that voice is endless, the person carrying it is always tired, always working to perform, always spending energy trying to manage what other people think rather than spending that energy on actually building a life. Eliminating the need for human permission frees up an enormous amount of energy. When the decision is no longer made based on what others will think, the decision becomes faster, cleaner, and more aligned with actual purpose. Things that used to take weeks of internal debate and conversation with other people begin to take hours because the question changes. The question is no longer, will they approve? The question becomes, is this right for where this life is going? And that is a question a person can answer for themselves from the inside without a committee. This does not happen overnight. The need for approval is deeply embedded in the way most people were formed. From childhood, the reward system was built around approval. When a child did well, they were praised. When a child failed, they were corrected. And so the brain learned from a very young age that approval feels good and disapproval feels dangerous. That seeking approval is how a person stays safe. Rewiring that takes time. It takes intentional practice. It takes choosing again and again in small moments to trust the inner compass rather than the outer vote. Choosing to wear the thing even if no one compliments it. Choosing to speak the thought even if not everyone agrees. Choosing to take the step even before the crowd says it is safe. Each small act of choosing without waiting for permission is a layer in the foundation. Each act of trusting the inner voice over the outer noise is another foot of depth added to the ground below. And over time, the foundation becomes solid enough that the building can stand on its own, that a person can live from the inside out rather than from the outside in. That is the first elimination, the need for human permission. Remove it quietly, completely, and watch what becomes possible. The second thing that must be eliminated is toxic and small-minded people from a person's closest circle. Now, this is the part where people get uncomfortable. This is the part where the defense mechanisms begin to activate, where thoughts like, but they are family, or but they have been in my life for so long, or but they are not really that bad, begin to surface. And those thoughts are understandable. They are very human. But they are also very dangerous when they are used as reasons to keep the wrong people close. There is a law. It is not a suggestion. It is not a theory. It is a law. And like gravity, it does not care whether a person believes in it or not. It operates regardless of belief. This law is called the law of association. And what it says is very simple. A person becomes like the people they spend the most time with. Not just in habits, not just in thinking, in values, in standards, in what they believe is possible, in what they expect from themselves and from life. Show the people around a person and the future of that person can be determined. Not because destiny is fixed, but because influence is real. Because human beings are profoundly shaped by proximity, by who they sit with, eat with, talk with, listen to, share time with day after day. The mind is not a sealed container. It is more like a sponge. It absorbs what it is placed in. If it is placed in a conversation where complaining is the main activity, it begins to absorb a complaining orientation to life. If it is placed in an environment where mediocrity is celebrated and ambition is mocked, it begins to absorb the belief that mediocrity is acceptable and ambition is foolish. If it is placed near people who believe that life is hard and unfair and that nothing ever changes, it will absorb that belief and it will begin to see the world through that lens. And here is the frightening part. This absorption is often invisible. It does not happen in one dramatic conversation. It happens slowly over months and years in the accumulation of small moments, a comment here, a joke there, a sigh when something new is mentioned, a dismissal when a dream is shared, a pattern of talk that always returns to what is wrong, what is not working, what cannot be done. And slowly, without realizing it is happening, the person who used to dream begins to stop dreaming. The person who used to believe begins to stop believing. The person who used to be willing to try begins to become afraid to try. And they look around and do not understand why they have shrunk. But the reason is in the company they kept. This is why the people a person chooses to be close to is not a casual decision. It is not something that should be decided by convenience or history or the fact that two people happen to live in the same neighborhood. The people in the inner circle are the most powerful environmental factor in a person's life. More powerful than education, more powerful than circumstances, more powerful than many of the other things that are usually blamed when a life does not grow. Now, what is a toxic person? This word gets used very loosely, so it is important to be precise. A toxic person is not simply someone who disagrees. Disagreement is healthy. A toxic person is not someone who challenges or pushes. Challenge can be a gift. A toxic person is not someone going through a hard time who needs support. Everyone deserves support in hard seasons. A toxic person, in this context, is someone whose consistent presence pulls a person down rather than lifting them. Someone who, when encountered, a person leaves feeling smaller than before the conversation. Someone who mocks growth, who discourages ambition, who responds to someone's wins with envy rather than celebration, who responds to someone's vision with doubt and dismissal rather than curiosity and encouragement. Someone who has accepted a small life and who, consciously or not, works to ensure that the people around them do not go further than where they are. Small-mindedness is not the same as low intelligence. A small-minded person can be very smart. Small-mindedness is a choice, often unconscious, to limit the world to what is already known, to be afraid of new ideas, to be threatened by growth, to feel more comfortable when the people around them stay the same, because change in others holds up a mirror and says, more was possible and I did not pursue it. The small-minded friend who laughs when a dream is shared is not doing it to be cruel. Often, they are doing it because they cannot afford emotionally to believe the dream is possible. Because if the dream is possible, then the question becomes, why did I not pursue mine? And that question is too painful. So it is easier to laugh, easier to say it cannot be done, easier to keep everyone at the same level so that the question never has to be answered. But that response, however understandable its source, is poison to the person with a dream. And the relationship that produces it consistently must be examined, must be honestly evaluated, and in many cases, must be changed. Now, how is this done? How does a person remove toxic and small-minded people from their life without creating a war, without being cruel, without making dramatic announcements, or writing long letters, or having painful confrontations that leave everyone wounded? The answer is in the words of this title, silently, without telling anyone. The silent exit is one of the most powerful moves a person can make. It is not cold. It is not harsh. It is not unkind. It is simply wise. And it works like this. A person does not announce that they are pulling back. They do not deliver a speech about why someone is no longer welcome in their inner circle. They do not post something on social media about removing toxic people from their life. They simply, quietly begin to reduce. They make themselves a little less available. They begin to invest the time that used to go to draining conversations into things that build them. They respond with warmth, but do not initiate. They show up when necessary, but do not create additional time together. And over weeks and months, the relationship naturally drifts to a distance that is healthier, that is more appropriate, that no longer carries the power to drain and diminish. This is not dishonesty. This is wisdom. Not every relationship needs a final conversation. Not every drift needs an explanation. Adults are allowed to manage their time and their energy without giving detailed justifications to every person they have chosen to be less close to. The silent exit protects both people. It does not create drama. It does not give the toxic person a stage to perform on, to argue, to guilt trip, to pull the person back in with emotion. It simply allows the relationship to find its natural level. And some relationships, when given a little less fuel, will simply quiet down on their own. Some people will notice and ask. And in those cases, a simple, honest, non-dramatic answer is enough. Things have been busy, just managing my time differently. Not a lie, not a confrontation, not an invitation for a long emotional conversation. Just a gentle, true statement that redirects without wounding. Now, what about family? Because family is the place where this is most complicated, most painful, and most necessary to address honestly. Family is not automatically safe. Blood does not guarantee support. Some of the most toxic environments a person can be in are family environments. Some of the most small-minded voices a person can hear are the voices of people who raised them or grew up with them. And the fact that this is painful does not make it untrue. Eliminating toxic family members from a close inner circle does not mean abandoning them. It does not mean refusing to love them or refusing to be present at important moments. It means making a clear-eyed decision about how much influence those people will have over the interior life. It means deciding that while they may always be family, they will not always be advisors. That while they will be present at the table, they will not be present in the planning room. That their opinions, while heard, will not be the compass. This is the mature and loving thing to do. Because when a person allows a toxic family member to have unlimited influence, they end up resenting that person, and the love gets buried under frustration. The relationship becomes something that is dreaded rather than something that is valued. But when healthy distance is maintained, when the influence is limited without the love being limited, it becomes possible to show up for that person with genuine care rather than perform patience. And this decision, like all the great decisions, is made quietly in the foundation, without a public announcement, without a declaration, without asking anyone if it is okay to do it. It is simply done. Because the life being built requires it. Because the building cannot stand if the foundation is being weakened by people who, however beloved, do not support the weight of the purpose being carried. The law of association cannot be escaped. It will operate whether a person pays attention to it or not. The question is whether a person will use it consciously or allow it to work against them without awareness. The people who build great lives are not the ones who are lucky enough to only be surrounded by great people. They are the ones who deliberately, intentionally, and consistently chose who would be given proximity to them. Who decided, often against pressure and accusation and guilt, that the company they kept was not an accident but a choice, a daily choice, a choice made in silence, without needing approval for it, without waiting for the crowd to agree. And the beautiful thing, the deeply satisfying thing, is that as a person grows, the people around them begin to change naturally. When someone starts investing in themselves, when they start showing up as more disciplined, more purposeful, more focused, the people who were being a negative influence often begin to drift away on their own, not because they are told to go, but because they no longer feel as comfortable in the presence of a person who is actually building, a person who is actually growing, a person whose life is becoming evidence that more is possible. Growth naturally separates people. And that is not a tragedy. That is the design. Because when the old connections that were holding a person back begin to loosen, space is created for new ones, for people who are building too, for people who understand purpose, for people who celebrate wins without envy, who speak honestly without cruelty, who challenge without destroying, who walk alongside without slowing down. Those people exist. They are not imaginary, but they cannot get close when the space is already occupied by the wrong ones. So the elimination happens first. The toxic and small-minded friendships are gently, quietly, and firmly moved to a distance. The energy is reclaimed. The space is open. And then naturally, over time, the right kind of company begins to arrive. This is how the foundation is built in silence. This is the work no one sees. Choosing who gets close. Managing the associations with wisdom and intentionality. Protecting the environment in which a person's thoughts, beliefs, and character are formed. Not because other people are bad, not because it is easy, but because the building requires it, because the purpose demands it, because the life that was always possible, the life that has been waiting patiently at the end of all this silent work, can only be reached by a person who was willing to do what needed to be done, even when no one was watching. The architect works in the mud, in the dark, while the city sleeps, and the building will stand. The city is still asleep. The architect is still in the mud. The foundation is still being built where no one can see it, and the work continues. Two things have already been addressed: the need for human permission and the toxic and small-minded people who occupy the inner circle. These are not small things. These are foundational removals. These are the kind of decisions that, when made with sincerity and held with consistency, begin to change the shape of a life from the inside. But the work is not finished. There are three more things that must go. Three more layers of weight that are pressing down on the foundation and preventing the building from rising as high as it was designed to go. And each one of them, just like the first two, must be eliminated without making an announcement, without calling a press conference, without posting about it, without waiting for someone to applaud the decision. Just quietly, firmly, and deliberately, in the dark, where the real work is done. The third thing that must be eliminated is the habit of explaining yourself to people who were not meant to understand. Read that again slowly. Explaining yourself to people who were not meant to understand. This is one of the most exhausting habits a person can carry. And it is so common, so deeply woven into how most people operate, that it often does not even register as a habit. It feels like being responsible. It feels like being considerate. It feels like the polite and mature thing to do, to tell people why a decision was made, to lay out the reasoning, to make sure everyone in the vicinity understands and is comfortable with the direction being taken. But consider what is actually happening in those moments. When a person feels the need to explain a decision they have made about their own life to people who have no authority over that life, what they are really doing is asking for a verdict. They are presenting their case and waiting for the judge to rule. And the judge in this scenario is someone who was never appointed to that position, someone who was never given the qualifications to make that call, someone who may be well-meaning but who is ultimately working from a place of incomplete information, limited perspective, and very often their own discomfort with change. Because here is what happens when a person starts to grow, when a person starts to make different choices, when a person begins to say no to things they used to say yes to, or yes to things they used to be afraid of. When a person starts to change direction, to change habits, to change the way they spend their time and energy, the people around them get uncomfortable. Not all of them, but many of them, because Change in one person is a kind of challenge to the people who are not changing. It quietly asks a question that no one wants to hear out loud. If they can grow, why am I not growing? If they can change, why am I choosing to stay the same? That question creates discomfort. And discomfort in people who have not learned to sit with it turns into pressure. Pressure on the person who is changing to explain themselves, to justify the growth, to make the change make sense in terms that the unchanged person can accept, to, in effect, shrink the change until it no longer makes anyone uncomfortable. And the person who is growing, who is kind and relational and does not want to hurt anyone, often gives in to this pressure. They begin to explain. They begin to say things like, I know it might seem strange, but here is why I am doing this. Or I understand if you do not agree, but let me explain my thinking. And they lay it all out. Every piece of reasoning, every layer of the vision, every detail of the why. And they watch the face of the person they are talking to. And they hope, they genuinely hope that at the end of the explanation, the person will nod and say, oh, now I understand. That makes perfect sense. I support you completely. But that moment rarely comes. Because the problem was never that the person lacked information. The problem was that the person was uncomfortable. And more information does not solve discomfort. More explanation does not produce acceptance. It often produces more questions, more challenges, more reasons why the thing being done is a risk or a mistake or something to reconsider. Because when a person is not ready to be at peace with someone else's growth, no amount of explanation will create that peace. So the person who explained everything is now standing there, having used a tremendous amount of energy, having opened up the inside of their vision to scrutiny, having given the people who were already doubtful even more things to push back on. And they feel more drained than before they started explaining. And they feel less certain about their direction, even though nothing about the direction has actually changed. This is what the habit of over-explaining costs. It costs energy, it costs certainty, it costs the peace that comes from simply knowing what must be done and doing it. There is a very old and very simple truth that must be planted in the foundation of every growing person's life. Not everyone deserves an explanation. Not everyone. Not family. Not friends. Not colleagues. Not people from the past who feel entitled to access to the decision-making process. Not people on the internet who ask why. Not people at the dinner table who want everything unpacked and defended. Some people, the wise mentors, the trusted advisors, the people who have walked further down the road and can genuinely help, deserve to be consulted, deserve to be given honest access to the thinking process, because their input adds something. Their perspective opens something new. Their wisdom helps refine the direction. But the people who are simply uncomfortable, the people who ask for an explanation, not because they want to help, but because they want to slow things down, the people whose questions are not really questions, but disguised objections, those people do not get the full explanation. They get kindness, they get warmth, they get a person who treats them with respect and dignity, but they do not get the inner blueprint. They do not get access to the foundation. They do not get to vote on the direction. Because the most sacred things a person carries, their vision, their calling, their purpose, their deepest desires for what life can become, those things must be protected. Not hidden out of fear, protected out of wisdom. Because sacred things that are exposed too early, before they have grown strong enough to withstand criticism, before the roots have gone deep enough to survive the storm, can be killed by the wrong conversation. A dream shared with the wrong person at the wrong time is not just left alone. It is attacked. Gently, sometimes. With love, sometimes. But attacked nevertheless. And a dream attacked before it is strong enough can die. So the habit to be broken here is not the habit of communication. Communication is valuable. The habit to be broken is the compulsion to defend, the compulsion to justify, The compulsion to need the people in the vicinity to understand and approve before moving forward. When this compulsion is eliminated, something remarkable happens. A kind of confidence begins to grow that has nothing to do with arrogance, a quietness, a steadiness, the kind of calm that comes from knowing that the work is being done, that the direction is right, and that it does not require a committee to confirm it. The kind of quiet that the architect in the mud has. He is not stopping to explain to the city why he is digging. He is digging because the building needs a foundation, and the building does not care whether the sleeping city understands his methods. This elimination is done silently, not by announcing from now on I will stop explaining myself to people, just by practicing one moment at a time the discipline of doing without defending, of choosing without justifying, of moving forward without waiting for the room to catch up. When someone asks why a new path is being taken, the answer can be simple and complete, because it is right for where this life is going. When someone pushes back, the answer does not have to be a full presentation. It can simply be a smile and a change of subject. The life being built is not a trial where every decision must be defended. It is a calling. And callings are responded to, not explained. The fourth thing that must be eliminated is the addiction to comfort. Comfort is not the enemy of a good life. Rest is important. Peace is valuable. The ability to be at ease in one's own existence is something worth building. But there is a version of comfort that is not peaceful rest. There is a version of comfort that is actually a slow form of dying. And it is the addiction to this kind of comfort that must be eliminated. This version of comfort is the insistence on only doing what is already familiar, only going to the places that are already known, only saying the things that already come easily, only attempting the things where success is already more or less guaranteed, only living within the edges of what has already been tried and tested, so that the risk of failure, the risk of embarrassment, the risk of being seen struggling is kept to a minimum. This is the addiction to comfort. And it masquerades as wisdom. It masquerades as caution. It tells people they are being responsible when they are actually being afraid. It tells people they are being mature when they are actually being paralyzed. And the damage it does is not dramatic. That is what makes it so dangerous. It does not happen in one terrible moment. A person does not wake up one morning and suddenly find that comfort has destroyed their life. It happens across years. In the accumulation of all the small moments where the easier choice was made, where the new thing was avoided, where the discomfort was retreated from, where the stretch was refused, and year by year, the world inside that person gets smaller. The edges of what feels possible pull inward. The range of what seems safe gets narrower. And the person who once had a wide and open sense of what life could hold now lives in a small room inside themselves. A room that is familiar, a room that is comfortable, a room from which the window looks out at the world, but the door is no longer being opened. Growth does not live in comfort. Growth lives at the edge of discomfort, right at the place where something is hard enough that a person is not yet sure they can do it, right at the boundary where the familiar ends and the unknown begins. That edge is where every muscle of character, every muscle of courage, every muscle of capability is built. And like the muscles in a body, those muscles only develop when they are stretched, only develop when they are placed under pressure, only develop when they are asked to do something they have not done before. A muscle that is never stretched does not stay the same size. It actually grows smaller. It atrophies. It loses the strength it once had because the body, in its wisdom, stops maintaining what is not being used. And the same is true of human potential. The capacity that is never stretched, never tested, never pushed to its edge will not stay at its current level. It will shrink. The courage that is never exercised will become timidity. The discipline that is never practiced will become weakness. The vision that is never pursued will become a vague vague memory of something once desired. Comfort does this. Comfort, when it becomes the highest value, atrophies everything that matters. Now, what does it mean to eliminate the addiction to comfort? It does not mean creating unnecessary suffering. It does not mean making life harder for the sake of being hard. It does not mean refusing rest or refusing pleasure. Those things have their place. A person who never rests is not a hero. A person who refuses all joy is not a saint. Rest is part of the design. Joy is part of the design. What it means is this: making a deliberate, intentional practice of regularly doing things that are difficult, regularly choosing the harder path when the harder path leads somewhere important, regularly placing the self in situations where growth is required, where the outcome is not yet certain, where failure is a real possibility, and going anyway, because it is in the going anyway that the real building happens. The real foundation is laid not in the moments of ease, but in the moments where ease was available and discomfort was chosen instead, where the comfortable option was visible and the growing option was chosen, where the familiar was right there and the new thing was reached for. Think about the people who are most admired in this world. Not the ones who were born with the easiest circumstances, the ones who built something remarkable. And look at what their lives required. Every single one of them, without exception, went through extended seasons of deep discomfort, seasons of uncertainty, seasons of not knowing whether it would work, seasons of criticism and doubt and failure and starting again, seasons where the comfortable choice was available every single day and they kept choosing the harder thing. That is not a coincidence. That is the pattern, because the life worth living is always on the other side of the discomfort that must be walked through to get there. The destination is not comfortable. The journey is not comfortable. The building of the foundation is not comfortable. The architect in the mud is not comfortable. He is cold and dirty and working in the dark, but he is building. And what he is building will outlast all of the comfort he gave up to build it. The addiction to comfort must be eliminated one day at a time, one choice at a time, not by making a dramatic announcement about becoming a different person, but by, in the small and ordinary moments of each day, choosing the action that builds over the action that soothes, getting up earlier than feels comfortable, having the honest conversation that feels uncomfortable, attempting the project for which success is not yet guaranteed, asking the question that feels embarrassing to ask, saying no to the invitation that would waste time, even though saying no feels socially uncomfortable, saying yes to the challenge that the body and mind immediately want to retreat from. Each of these small choices is a layer. Each one is a small piece of foundation, and none of them will feel good in the moment. That is the point. The point is not to feel good in the moment. The point is to build something that will feel far better than comfort ever could. Something that will look back at the years of discomfort and say it was worth every difficult morning, every hard conversation, every moment of uncertainty, every step taken when the ground was not yet solid. Comfort is available right now. Purpose is available through discomfort. And a person who is building a life of meaning must be willing every single day to trade the first for the second. This habit, this addiction, is not removed by willpower alone. It is removed by changing the relationship with discomfort itself, by learning to see discomfort not as a signal that something is wrong, but as a signal that something is growing, by learning to feel the tightness of stretching and interpret it not as danger, but as evidence of progress, by learning to sit with uncertainty long enough to realize that uncertainty does not have to be resolved before a person can move. That moving forward into the unknown is not recklessness. It is faith. It is the deepest expression of belief that the purpose is real, that the capacity is there, that the foundation being built will hold. Eliminate the addiction to comfort quietly, without making it a performance, without telling anyone that a harder life is being intentionally chosen. just by choosing it every day in the small and large moments that make up the texture of a human life. The fifth and final thing that must be eliminated is perhaps the most hidden of all five. It is the most difficult to see. It is the most painful to remove, and it is the most essential. The fifth thing that must be eliminated is the old story. Every person carries a story about who they are, a story about where they come from, a story about what kind of life is available to them, a story about what they are capable of and what they are not, a story about what they deserve, what is realistic for them, what the ceiling of their life looks like. This story was not written in a moment. It was written across years. It was written by the first teacher who said a child was not smart enough, by the parent who, trying to protect, said things like, people like us don't do things like that, by the neighborhood that said, stay small, by the failure that said, try no more, by the rejection that said, you are not wanted, by the poverty that said, you are limited, by the abuse that said, you are worthless, by the comparison that said, you are behind, by the loss that said, you are cursed. These words, these experiences, these repeated messages written by life before a person was old enough to evaluate them or question them or choose whether to believe them, they formed a story. And that story is now running in the background of every decision, every dream, every attempt, every moment of courage, and every retreat from courage. The old story is not always loud. In fact, it is rarely loud. It is quiet. It is the voice beneath the voice. It is the belief beneath the decision. It is the ceiling that shows up just as the hands reach upward. It is the whisper that says, who do you think you are, in the moment before the attempt. It is the feeling of not quite belonging in a room that the person has every right to be in. It is the habit of shrinking, of pulling back, of preempting the rejection by rejecting the dream first. The old story is the most powerful force working against a person's future. More powerful than external opposition, more powerful than lack of resources, more powerful than difficult circumstances. Because external opposition can be overcome by effort. Lack of resources can be overcome by creativity and persistence. Difficult circumstances can be navigated by a person who believes they have what it takes. But the old story, running silently inside, telling a person that they do not have what it takes, that the dream is for other people, that things like that do not happen to someone with their history, that story does not need outside help to do its damage. It does it all from the inside. And here is the most painful truth about the old story. Most people do not even know they are living inside it. They do not wake up in the morning and think, today I will be limited by my old story. They simply wake up and feel the limitation. They simply experience, as if it were reality, the ceiling that the story has placed above them. They simply find, without understanding why, that they cannot quite make themselves take the step, cannot quite believe fully, cannot quite allow themselves to want the thing as openly as they want it, because somewhere underneath the wanting is a deep, quiet voice saying, but it probably will not happen. That voice is the old story, and it must be eliminated. Now, eliminating the old story is not the same as pretending the past did not happen. The past happened. The hard things were real. The painful experiences were real. The losses and the failures and the words that wounded, those were all real. Pretending they were not real is not healing. It is suppression. And suppression does not eliminate the story. It just buries it deeper, where it continues to operate without being seen. Eliminating the old story means something more honest and more courageous than pretending. It means looking at the story directly, seeing it for what it is, naming it, and then making a deliberate, clear decision that the story of where a person came from will not be the story of where they are going. These are two different things. Where someone came from and where they are going. And the confusion between these two things is the source of enormous unnecessary suffering, because many people are using the story of where they came from as a map for where they are going, as if the past were a prediction of the future, as if the experiences of a child determine the possibilities of an adult, as if the environment that shaped a person's beginning had the authority to determine their end. It does not. The beginning of a story does not determine its end. The first chapter of a book is not always representative of where the book goes. Some of the most powerful, most moving, most transformative books ever written began in darkness, in pain, in places of loss and difficulty. And they became great, not despite that beginning, but because of the character that was built in response to that beginning. Some of the most remarkable lives ever lived began in circumstances that, by the logic of the old story, should have made greatness impossible. Born into poverty, born into broken families, born into places with no resources and no visible path forward. And yet something happened. A decision was made, quietly and deeply, that the beginning was not the destination, that the story that was given at birth was not the only story available, that a new story could be written, not in place of the old one, on top of it, built from the same material but shaped by a different hand. And the hand that shapes the new story is the person themselves, not the circumstances, not the people who wrote the old story, not the experiences that established it. The person choosing one day at a time to act from the new story rather than the old one, choosing to take the step that the old story says is too big, choosing to speak the word that the old story says will not be received, choosing to walk into the room that the old story says is not for them, and then standing there in that room, in that discomfort, and discovering that they belong, that the ceiling was not real, that the limitation was a story, not a fact. This is how the old story is eliminated. Not in one dramatic moment of breakthrough, not in a single powerful conversation or a single cry of release. It is eliminated the same way the foundation is built. Quietly, consistently, over time, in the accumulation of small moments where the new story was chosen over the old one, where the person acted from who they are becoming rather than from who they were told they were. And every time this happens, every time the step is taken in spite of the old story loses a little more power. Its voice gets a little quieter. Its ceiling gets a little less solid. And the person begins to discover gradually but undeniably that the world is bigger than the story said, that the possibilities are wider, that the calling is real and reachable, that the life that always felt like it belonged to someone else was actually waiting this whole time for this person to decide to live it. This elimination is the most intimate of all five. It cannot be done in public. It cannot be announced or performed or celebrated before it is complete. It is done in the deepest and most private part of a person, in the place where no one else has access, in the place where the architect works when even the city cannot see him, in the mud, in the dark, in the silence. And it requires the same things the architect requires: tools, persistence, the willingness to keep working even when the progress is invisible, the faith that what is being built underneath will eventually be seen on top, not as a boast, not as a declaration, but simply as a building that stands, a life that is evident, a person who is visibly more than what the old story said they could be. Now, take all five of these eliminations together, hold them in one place, and see what they add up to. A person who no longer needs human permission, who no longer allows toxic and small-minded people to have close access to the interior of their life, who no longer exhaust themselves justifying and explaining every decision and direction, who no longer worships at the altar of comfort when discomfort would build something greater, and who has looked their old story in the face and decided with full awareness of everything it contains that it does not have authority over what comes next. What kind of person is this? What kind of foundation does this represent? This is a person with roots, deep roots, roots that the storm cannot pull up, roots that were built not in the easy seasons, but in the hard ones, roots that hold not because the ground around them is perfect, but because the root system went deep enough that the imperfect ground cannot shake them. This is a person with internal authority, not arrogance, not the swagger of someone performing confidence for an audience, but the quiet, steady authority of someone who knows who they are and where they are going. Who does not need the room to agree in order to take the next step? Who does not need the crowd to applaud in order to keep building? This is a person who has become the architect of their own life, who is doing the work in the dark, in the mud, in the silence, without waiting for the city to notice, without needing the city to approve, building the foundation that will eventually hold everything up, not rushing to show the world the building before the building is ready, not performing growth before growth is real, just working, just digging, just going deeper into the ground that most people are afraid to touch. And the city will sleep through all of it. The crowd will not see the years in the mud. They will not know about the conversations that were never had, the explanations that were never given, the permissions that were never sought, the comfort that was traded, the old story that was quietly, painfully, faithfully replaced. They will not know any of that. They will only see the building when it rises. They will only see the person when the person appears, fully formed, standing on a foundation that cannot be seen from the street. And when they ask, as they always ask, how did you do it? How did you build something like this? Where did you come from? What is your secret? The answer will be simple, and it will be true. And the person will say, not with pride, but with peace. The work was done where no one could see it, in the dirt, in the dark, in the silence. That is the secret of the great life. It is not glamorous. It is not fast. It is not performed. It is not validated in real time by an audience who gives applause. It is built in the private places, in the daily choices, in the eliminations that no one witnesses, in the disciplines that no one grades, in the faith that what is being built matters even when no one else can see it yet. The building does not start with the sky. It never did. It starts in the dirt. It starts where no one is looking. And the person who understands this, who's willing to go into the dirt, who's willing to do the silent work, who's willing to eliminate what needs to be eliminated without asking anyone if it is okay, without explaining themselves, without waiting for permission, without the comfort of being understood or applauded or agreed with, that person will build something that stands. Not for a season, not until the next storm, but for the long years, for the generations that come after, for the purpose that was placed inside them long before they had words for it, for the calling that was always real, always possible, always waiting for a person who was willing to go deep enough into the foundation to find it and hold it and build from it. The architect goes back to work now. The city is still asleep. The foundation is still being built. The sky is still waiting. Go build.